there's an interesting aspect of Jensen's presentation, and that was that he mentioned Foxconn, um, and he also mentioned, what was it? I think it was Pegatron and Wistron as well. Now, if I'm correct, all three are the top manufacturers for Apple devices, and we're seeing this shift with the Trump tariffs and this return of the or onshoring of manufacturing to America. Is this the beginning? Now, if you have all these three, Foxconn, and the other two deploying or trying to look at factories that are simulated using NVIDIA's Omniverse, is this now an indication that you could perhaps see a return to American-made iPhones and Apple devices a lot earlier than most people are expecting, perhaps even pulled out of India?
It takes a while to build a factory. Just the planning stages of them can be pretty long, and then it takes a while to set them up. And a lot of times it comes down to the question of how fully automated it is. So if it's fully automated, you'd expect you could put it everywhere. But even though it's automated, you still need some people to run the factory, managers and everything else. But that might end up being a small part of it. There's also the cost of building the factory in the first place. So a lot of labor right now goes into that. And can you build the same factory for the same cost in different locations, and how much that goes on? The other might be the amount of local expertise you have in setting up the automation. So it's not just something you roll off the back of the truck and put in there. You need engineers and everyone to set it up and test it out and get it going. And that's another issue. So it's increased automation makes it easier to onshore, no doubt about it. The question is, have they automated it 100%, or do you still have a lot of manual tasks?
Yeah. I think the idea that it's just cheap labor is not really true anymore. It's also the highly qualified labor in these areas, in China and wherever, that it's not just that the cost of hiring them, but it's also that availability of highly educated engineers.
And let's remember that, okay, China has 3 times the population of the US, roughly, something like that. However, they graduate 10 times the number of engineers every year than the US.
Yeah.
So that's a huge difference as far as the talent pool that you have. You need a lot more engineers.
Yeah, but also you've got India and the whole question of friendshoring. And India has perhaps a slightly bigger talent pool.
Absolutely.
Definitely a bigger population than China. So I can't help but think about the geopolitics of manufacturing and supply chains, and how this is going to play out over the next 5-10 years.
Absolutely. You do have an outstanding talent pool in India. It's India's always been a conundrum. The educational system in India has been absolutely great. Depending on how you measure it, they teach more people to read and write every year than any other country. Yet at the same time, you have high illiteracy rates because it hasn't been able to get down to the whole population. But eventually, that's going to happen. So it is one of the largest educational systems in the world, no doubt about it.
Given what we're seeing with these developments in AI, digital AI, and embodied AI, and the pace at which you're seeing this competition between China and America, and this rush to develop AI-enabled humanoid bots and deploy them. We're seeing China doing a lot of it already. And in some ways, I think they're ahead of America in deploying these bots. And I think that's been a wake-up call for America. How do you, from a technological point of view, the big picture, where do you see this geopolitical competition and the manufacturing aspect of it and the supply chains that feed into it? How do you see this developing? Because we seem to be moving towards a bipolar world in strategic manufacturing. And that has implications for the economy, for security, and then everything else.
I think it's really good that people realize that the importance is in manufacturing. In the Second World War, it was the arsenal of diplomacy that won the war. It wasn't necessarily the armies, but it was the equipment and the material that was able to be produced. And it really just comes down to manufacturing. And so that's something that everyone has to understand, is like, make manufacturing something that people actually are interested in doing, that it's something they want to study. And I think we're seeing more and more of that, a lot of interest in that, robotics is cool, manufacturing is cool, it's not boring. And without manufacturing, you don't have stuff. So we've kind of taken that a bit for granted for a long time. And I'm excited to see the fact that, maybe this is the kind of competition that we need in order for everyone to realize how important manufacturing is and what you need to do for your own strategic security. There's a reason you want to have food security in a different country, where a lot of countries have like a dairy lobby and stuff like that. I agree. Every one of them should, something happens, should be able to not have to worry about importing, milk and butter and everything else. So, but there's clearly something that doesn't make sense to produce locally, and that you do want to have these different supply chains that you work in. And the same thing with manufacturing, is
or that
you don't want to push it all
or
outside.
that you cannot produce locally because
of
the
you just
environment,
can't.
right? Yeah,
Because of the environment. It's like, you think about it. If Finland is a country of like 5.5 million, they're very educated and everything else. They don't need to have a finished automobile. I mean, it's like they're just not big enough to support their own automobile industry, yet they do more than enough other stuff. And so you just go around like that. It's like there's very few countries that can afford to have like shipbuilding or something like that, especially if they're landlocked. But they certainly depend upon the fact that ships are being built somewhere around the world to be able to move goods, including their own goods that they're producing. So you have to be very careful of saying that a country has to do everything. You just need to make sure you do some things that are going to be important.
And then I guess politics can kind of put a wrench in the machinery. I mean, in Europe, we're struggling to get our own battery production going, and we're struggling to keep our automotive industries up and running. So it's, we're really not.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you next, Gustav, because you've got this, shall I say, this advantage of latitude, sitting where you are, looking at Europe. What's your sense of, I mean, as we watch America and China, jostle it out, where is Europe in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, we've been trying, as I said, we've been trying to get the battery plants up and running, and we just haven't managed. And it's not for lack of trying. I mean, we had Northvolt going all at it with former Elon colleagues trying to get it started with support of Chinese engineers and everything, but they just didn't manage. And I don't think the analysis of why Northvolt failed is really done yet, but they just didn't manage to make any batteries. And when it comes to the we have Volvo, we had Saab, and all of these in Sweden, even like big automotive brands that are being bought up or chipped off. We're still pretty good at the semi production, I guess. So that's basically the one industry where we're still hanging on, I think, when it comes to big machinery. So there are probably others, I'm sorry, but I mean, they're talking about making their own Starlink competitor, but I mean, there's no chance when you don't have the lift.
And the other thing is, remember, is just because is Sweden, a country of about 20 million people? Does it really need to have its own automotive company? In the old days, maybe it kind of made sense, but it's very hard to be competitive because there's so much that goes into building a car. However, it doesn't mean that Sweden or Finland, the others, are out of the automotive industry. They build a lot of important components that go into cars. A lot of other countries do. So when you actually go down the supply chain, you find out, holy cow, they may not build a car, but we couldn't build these cars without maybe 5% of the components that are coming from there. And that's the way supply chains work. The nature of it is that a lot of countries are better at producing certain things than others. Or it's just forget about the fact that the borders are there. Just imagine, Europe should really be considered as one big kind of country, which they're trying to do through the EU. And it makes more sense that you have the trade going around there, because no one country could stand by itself and do everything. You have to do it in collaboration.
Yeah. Airbus being a case in point, but it just seems to be that when you talk about AI and manufacturing and this new next generation of this revolution in simulating factories, and this whole tectonic shift that we're seeing is being led by America and China, and that Europe is just nowhere. And even manufacturing powerhouses from the past, like Germany, there seems to be a real lack of any news about any focus from them on these aspects of manufacturing?
I think it's starting to change a little bit. So there are a lot of robot companies starting to pop up in Europe, as well as humanoid companies that we probably haven't got that much attention. They're starting to be there. So there is some hope that the Europeans will be kind of rising to the challenge. We'll have to follow that over
but
the
enough
next 12 months
and
to
in
see.
time, because
there's
China's already
couple,
looking at flooding the European manufacturing factory market with its robots.
There's a couple that have possibilities that we will see. A few that I'll be visiting in the next couple of months to kind of get an idea where they are. But I think that they're getting the clarion call right now that they need to wake up, because it's not just the humanoids. I think they're beginning to realize that, man, the EVs are going to be coming in. And so as much as the legacy OEMs are trying to hold on to the internal combustion engine there, it's just, people are preferring the EVs for a variety of reasons. And so if they can't buy them from a European manufacturer, they're going to look elsewhere, especially if they're going to be coming in really cheaply. In the end, everyone looks at the price tag. You can put as much nationalism on it, but the thing is, they'll say, I can't afford a ride. And then suddenly this is coming in and you can throw a tariff on it, but if it's still cheaper than the local guy, I'm going to go with it. That's what a lot of people do. Yeah.
And they're also seeing the technological advances that the local producers aren't really making. So, we've had Tesla now for a while, and people were really interested in that brand, but the Chinese competitors are coming in quite strong in Europe. So, as you say, they are still a bit on the expensive side, but their technology is catching up.
And it's not like this wasn't predicted 5 years ago. It's like a lot of people were just saying that. If you just look at what's going on and what's happening, it's like they were saying, like, by 2025, you're really going to start seeing that. And you're starting to. I mean, you're beginning to see the outline. So by 2030, it could be a very different landscape. And I wonder how many more years before you really start to see a consolidation in the automotive markets of companies just like, we're not selling anymore. What are we going to have to do? We're either going to have to pivot or we're going to have to join forces. And that's been happening. I mean, it's like Stellantis is a rather convoluted group of all these companies that couldn't get, on their own, couldn't stand. Same thing with Volvo and Saab. In the end, they couldn't stand on their own. They had to effectively merge with these others. The brands may still be around, but they're working with others. And the question is, how long can Mercedes stand on its own, or BMW on its own? The Volkswagen Group is already having a hard time. They're under pressure. And even then, remember, that was always a group, because Audi and Porsche couldn't really go it alone either. They had to team up with Volkswagen, and all the other brands are there. So you just kind of wonder, is there going to be more as a result?
All right. So just one final question to you, Scott, on the political, on the politics of and the geopolitics of all of this. This trade war or the tariff war between America and China, do you feel, so there are many reasons for it, but I somehow get the sense that one of the underpinning factors is a shock test to see if what America can do to onshore or reshore manufacturing, and the upcoming or the ongoing AI enabled AI. Embodied AI, humanoid bot wave is kind of one of the underpinning factors for that. Would you say that's true in a sense?
Yeah, it's part. You have to do something to put the incentives, and there can be a debate on whether the best way to do it is through tariff policies or other kinds of trade policies or incentives. But these things all take time, because you need to build it. You need the planning phase. You can do all sorts of things to get the red tape out of the way and say, just let us go ahead and build. And this is something that Tesla has been very famous at trying to do. But even when they cut through all that stuff, it still takes time to pour the concrete, for the concrete to dry, to start filling it with all the automation you want to put in there. You have sub-suppliers that got to put that up. They all have timetables. So it takes time. And for every factory you're building here, there's another one you can't build because all your resources are there busy building it. So you just can't have them all be built at the same time. And so obviously it's a painful process. We can do a lot to speed that up, but still it's not an overnight thing. So you have to have a consistent policy. And this is the thing, is we don't know what the actual policy is going to be, because it's like up here one day and down here and go something like, and it's very hard to plan. In businesses really don't care what the tariffs are. They really don't care what taxation policy is, so long as it's consistent, if they can plan around it. They may say it's like unfair or something being too high here and there, but for the most part, if you know it's going to be there, then you can go ahead and plan and do it. But if something happens that even a whiff of an idea that the tariffs could drop, that suddenly now all this money we're putting in here, because it's a long-term investment. It's not a 1 or 2 month thing. You're talking about a couple of years before we even start doing production, before we even start getting the cash flow. And then the question is, are we going to get a return on investment? So it's very risky. So whatever the policy is, it at some point it has to settle down. And we don't know what this is. Maybe this is just again, like, keep everyone kind of guessing for a while, and then finally get what you want, and then you settle it, and then just say, okay, let's just hold it there, and then it will allow people to plan. But the CHIPS Acts and stuff like that, they went a long way to being able to bring a lot of it on there. It's just that it takes more than one administration before you start to see the effects of that.
Yeah. The reason I ask you that is because I did hear Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick say this in particular, that one of the underpinnings is this revolution in AI and robotics that he sees a revival and a renaissance in American manufacturing being powered by. So it just got me thinking how much of what we see in the tariff war and this, what is really a shock to the system that America has tried to orchestrate.
I mean, it will go a long way, but the bots aren't ready yet. Okay, there's still a few years before there's enough of them, and they're good enough that it would have like an impact in that area. And the thing is, they still have to populate a factory. That factory has to be built. So just building the bots itself won't solve the problem. You have all these other things that you have to do planning around. And it could very well be that all you need to do is make everyone aware that this kind of technology is coming, and they begin to realize that, oh, that next generation part or product that we're thinking of, maybe we can build it just as cheaply here as over there. And that sort of makes more sense, is to change the mindset of how everyone thinks about the way you do manufacturing. And I think it should be like more of an educational process than necessarily thinking policy is going to change things right away.
Yeah. But when you look at that, at Foxconn and the other Apple manufacturing companies being spoken about in their, in the Omniverse presentation by Jensen, you can't but help put 2 and 2 together and kind of make that connection.